Could you survive that? Could you find a reason to keep breathing when the very thing that connected you to the world was ripped away forever? This is the story of a soldier who lost his eyes in combat, but what happened next defied every expectation, every medical prediction, and every limitation we place on the human spirit. Because when Sergeant Ivan Castro's world went dark on that battlefield in Iraq, something extraordinary began to emerge from the depths of that darkness. Something that would not only save his life but transform the lives of thousands of others in ways nobody could have imagined. You see, most of us take vision for granted. We wake up, we open our eyes, and we see. Simple, right? But what if I told you that seeing with your eyes might actually be the most limited form of vision there is? What if losing your sight could somehow make you see more clearly than you ever did before? I know it sounds impossible, even contradictory. But stay with me here, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about strength, resilience, and what it truly means to overcome the impossible. Ivan was just 23 years old when the eye had exploded. A young man with dreams of coming home, starting a family, maybe coaching Little League one day. In an instant, shrapnel tore through his face, destroying both of his eyes and leaving him in a darkness so complete, so absolute, that he couldn't even remember what light looked like anymore. The doctor saved his life, but when he woke up in that military hospital in Germany, wrapped in bandages and surrounded by machines, he wished they hadn't, because the man who went into that operating room could see the world around him. The man who came out would never see again. Have you ever felt like you've lost something so fundamental to who you are that you don't even recognize yourself anymore? That's where Ivan found himself. Not just blind, but completely untethered from reality, from hope, from any sense of purpose. His fellow soldiers visited him, their voices full of forced optimism and hollow encouragement, but he could hear the pity underneath every word. He could sense the relief in their footsteps as they left his room, grateful it wasn't them lying there in the darkness. For months, Ivan existed in what he later described as a prison darker than any physical blindness. Depression wrapped around him like chains. Every day felt like drowning in slow motion. The military provided resources, rehabilitation programs, counselors trained in trauma and loss, but none of it penetrated the wall he'd built around himself. Because here's what nobody talks about when they discuss wounded warriors and miraculous recoveries. Sometimes the real battle doesn't start on the battlefield. Sometimes it starts when you come home and realize that the person you were is gone forever and you have no idea who you're supposed to become, but then something shifted, something that started so small, so subtle, that Ivan almost missed it entirely. And that tiny shift would become the catalyst for one of the most remarkable transformations you've ever heard. Fika Kamiko 80 Final. Because what happened next isn't just about one soldier's journey from darkness to light. It's about discovering a kind of vision that most people spend their entire lives never finding, even with perfect eyesight. So what was that turning point? What pulled Ivan back from the edge when everything seemed lost? So what was that turning point? What pulled Ivan back from the edge when everything seemed lost? It wasn't a miracle cure. It wasn't some revolutionary medical breakthrough or a moment of divine intervention that suddenly made everything okay. No, it was something far more human, far more unexpected, and honestly far more powerful than any of that. It started with a voice. A small voice that cut through the darkness one afternoon when Ivan was sitting alone in the rehabilitation center. Lost in his thoughts, contemplating whether this half-life was even worth living anymore. "Are you the soldier?" Those 4 words spoken by a 7-year-old girl visiting the facility with her father. Another wounded veteran would become the first crack in the wall Ivan had built around himself. He couldn't see her, but he could hear the innocence in her voice, untainted by pity or awkwardness. She wasn't afraid of his scars. She wasn't uncomfortable with his darkness. She was just curious, genuinely curious about who he was beyond the injuries. And here's where the story takes a turn that I think will resonate with so many of you watching right now. Because transformation doesn't usually happen in grand, dramatic moments. It happens in tiny interactions, in unexpected connections, in the smallest decisions to try just one more time when everything in you wants to quit. You know what I'm talking about, right? Those moments when you're at your lowest and something, someone, or some tiny spark reminds you that maybe, just maybe, there's still a reason to keep going. Before we go any further, I want to pause for just a second, because if this story is touching something in you, if you've ever faced your own kind of darkness or watched someone you love struggle through something impossible, I need you to do something for me. Leave a comment below and tell me what's resonating with you right now. Maybe you're a veteran yourself, or maybe you love someone who is. Maybe you've faced a different kind of loss, a different kind of darkness that makes Ivan's story hit close to home. Whatever it is, share it with this community, because that's what we're building here. A space where real stories about real resilience can be told and heard without judgment. And listen, if you're finding value in this content, if stories like Ivan's matter to you, hit that like button. I know it seems like a small thing, but here's the truth. Your engagement is what allows us to keep telling these stories that mainstream media often overlooks. These are the stories of everyday heroes. People who've been broken and rebuilt themselves from the ground up, and they deserve to be heard. When you like, comment, and subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're amplifying voices that need to be amplified. You're helping us reach someone out there who might be in their own darkness right now, desperately needing to hear that transformation is possible. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're going to keep bringing you these powerful stories of lives transformed by pain, of people who refuse to let their circumstances define their destiny. This is a community of people who believe in the power of the human spirit, and I want you to be part of it. Now back to Ivan and that little girl, because what happened in the weeks following that simple encounter would set him on a path that nobody, not even Ivan himself, could have predicted. That child's fearless curiosity awakened something in him that all the professional counseling and rehabilitation couldn't touch. She didn't see him as broken. She saw him as interesting, as someone with a story worth knowing. And in her innocence, she asked him a question that would change everything. If you can't see anymore, how do you know what people look like? It was such a simple question, the kind only a child would ask without overthinking it. But it forced Ivan to actually consider something he'd been avoiding. How do you navigate a world you can't see? How do you connect with people when you can't read their faces? How do you find meaning when one of your primary senses is gone forever? And more importantly, was there perhaps another way to see that he'd never considered before? If you can't see anymore, how do you know what people look like? It was such a simple question, the kind only a child would ask without overthinking. But it forced Ivan to actually consider something he'd been avoiding. How do you navigate a world you can't see? How do you connect with people when you can't read their faces? How do you find meaning when one of your primary senses is gone forever? And more importantly, was there perhaps another way to see that he'd never considered before? That conversation with that little girl planted a seed that would eventually grow into something remarkable. But before we get there, you need to understand who Ivan Castro really was before that explosion changed everything. Because the transformation we're about to explore only makes sense when you know what was transformed in the first place. Ivan grew up in Southern California, the kind of kid who was always outside, always moving, always dreaming about doing something that mattered. He wasn't particularly religious, wasn't overly patriotic in the flag-waving sense, but he had this deep belief that life should mean something beyond just existing. When he joined the army at 19, it wasn't because he couldn't find anything else to do. It was because he wanted to be part of something bigger than himself. He wanted to prove, maybe to himself more than anyone else, that he had what it took to stand in the gap, to be the kind of person others could count on when everything went sideways. His platoon mates described him as the guy who could lighten any mood, who remembered everyone's birthday, who asked about your family back home and actually listened to the answer. He had this gift for seeing people, really seeing them, beyond the uniform and the rank and the tough exterior everyone wore in a combat zone. He noticed when someone was struggling, when the weight of deployment was getting too heavy, when a soldier needed someone to just sit with them in silence and let them know they weren't alone. On April 7, 2006, Ivan's convoy was moving through a neighborhood in Ramadi, one of the most dangerous cities in Iraq at the time. The mission was routine, at least by wartime standards: patrol the area, show presence, gather intelligence, come back safe. Ivan was 23 years old, engaged to his high school sweetheart, counting down the days until he could go home and start building the life he'd been dreaming about. He had 3 months left on his deployment. 3 months, and then everything would begin. The IED was buried under the road, positioned perfectly to maximize devastation. When it detonated, the blast was so powerful that it flipped the Humvee, turning their armored vehicle into a coffin of twisted metal and flames. Ivan doesn't remember much about those first seconds. He remembers a flash of light brighter than anything he'd ever seen, a pressure wave that felt like being hit by a freight train, and then a sensation he'd later describe as falling through space with no idea which way was up or down. The shrapnel tore through the vehicle with surgical precision, finding every gap in the armor, every vulnerable point. A piece of metal, no bigger than a coin, traveled at supersonic speed directly into Ivan's face, destroying both of his eyes instantly. Another piece punctured his lung, so the explosion shattered his left arm and left burns across 30% of his body. His fellow soldiers pulled him from the wreckage while taking fire, applying tourniquets, screaming into radios for a medevac, doing everything they could to keep him alive long enough to get him to a surgeon. When Ivan woke up in the military hospital in Landstuhl, Germany, his head was wrapped in so many bandages that he couldn't move, couldn't touch his face, couldn't do anything except lie there in a fog of morphine and confusion. The doctors had saved his life through a series of emergency surgeries that lasted more than 18 hours. They'd repaired his lung, stabilized his arm, treated the burns, but they couldn't save his eyes. The damage was catastrophic, irreversible, complete. When they finally told him, when the words permanent blindness cut through the medication and the denial, Ivan felt something inside him break that had nothing to do with physical injuries. The doctors told him the news, and his world didn't just go dark, it disappeared completely. Every plan, every dream, every vision of his future evaporated in that hospital room. How do you marry your fiancée when you can't see her walk down the aisle? How do you be a father when you can't watch your kids grow up? How do you even be a man when you need help with everything from getting dressed to finding the bathroom? These weren't just questions. They were accusations his mind hurled at him every waking moment, indictments of a future that felt more like a prison sentence than a life. For months after returning to the States, Ivan existed in what can only be described as a waking nightmare. The military provided incredible support, state-of-the-art rehabilitation at the Blind Center, therapy sessions with counselors who specialized in trauma, a team of specialists dedicated to helping him adapt. But none of it penetrated the wall of despair he'd built around himself. He learned the mechanics of blindness, how to use a cane, how to navigate spaces through sound and touch. But he refused to accept that this was his life now. He felt like half a man in a world that didn't need him anymore, a burden to everyone around him, a ghost haunting the life he used to have. His fiancée tried, God knows she tried, but eventually the weight became too much. She left not because she didn't love him, but because he wouldn't let her in. He'd pushed her away so many times, rejected her help so aggressively, that she finally had to save herself from drowning alongside him. His family walked on eggshells, never knowing if their help would be received with gratitude or rage. Friends from the military visited less and less, not because they didn't care, but because Ivan made it clear through his silence and his bitterness that he didn't want to be reminded of who he used to be. Depression doesn't just make you sad. It makes you numb, hollow, disconnected from everything that used to bring joy or purpose or meaning. Ivan spent entire days sitting in his room, lost in memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The darkness wasn't just in his eyes. It was in his mind, his heart, his soul. He'd survived the blasts, survived the surgeries, survived the long months of physical recovery, only to discover that survival isn't the same thing as living. And he honestly didn't know if he had the strength to figure out the difference. That's where he was, mentally and emotionally, when that 7-year-old girl walked up and asked him that innocent question. She didn't know she was talking to someone on the edge. She didn't know that her father had brought her to the rehabilitation center specifically to show her what courage looked like, what sacrifice meant, what heroes really were. She just knew there was an interesting person sitting alone, and she was curious. But then something happened that nobody expected, not even him. That child's question, so pure and unfiltered, cracked something open in Ivan that all the professional intervention couldn't reach. Because she wasn't asking out of pity. She was asking because she genuinely wanted to know. She wasn't seeing a broken soldier. She was seeing a person with a different way of experiencing the world, and that difference fascinated rather than frightened her. Over the following weeks, Ivan couldn't stop thinking about her question. How do you know what people look like when you can't see them? And the more he sat with it, the more he realized that maybe, just maybe, he'd been asking the wrong questions all along. Maybe the real question wasn't how to get back what he'd lost, but how to discover what was possible with what remained. Maybe blindness wasn't the end of perception, but the beginning of a different kind of seeing altogether. He started training his other senses, not as a rehabilitation exercise, but as a genuine exploration of human capability. And what he discovered shocked him. Within months, he could navigate complex environments using echolocation, making clicking sounds with his tongue and interpreting the returning echoes to build mental maps of spaces. Things that seemed impossible became his new normal. He could identify people by their breathing patterns before they spoke. He could sense emotional states through subtle changes in body temperature and micro-movements that cited. People never notice because they're too busy looking at faces. But the real transformation wasn't physical. It was perceptual, philosophical, spiritual even. Losing his sight didn't blind him to the world. It opened his eyes to dimensions of human experience that most people never access. He started noticing the invisible threads that connect us all, the unspoken communications that happen beneath words, the truth that people reveal through tone and timing in the spaces between sentences. He could hear when someone was lying, not because he had superhuman abilities, but because he wasn't distracted by the performance people put on with their facial expressions and body language. Ivan began to understand that we live in a world obsessed with surfaces, with appearances, with the visible markers of success and happiness and connection. But underneath all that visual noise, there's a deeper reality, a truth that can only be perceived when you stop looking and start truly paying attention. He realized that for most of his life, he'd been seeing with his eyes and missing everything. A real person, the authentic emotion, the genuine connection. All of it was invisible to the kind of seeing he'd relied on before. This revelation didn't come all at once. It emerged gradually through hundreds of small moments, interactions, and insights that accumulated over time. But once Ivan began to see the world this way, once he understood that blindness had given him access to a kind of clarity that eluded most sighted people, everything changed. His purpose shifted from trying to recover what he'd lost to sharing what he'd discovered. And that decision, that fundamental shift in perspective, would end up impacting thousands of lives in ways he never imagined. Now I want to go even deeper into this transformation, because what Ivan did next wasn't just about adapting to disability. It was about recognizing that every limitation contains within it a hidden gift, a doorway to capabilities and insights that wouldn't exist without the constraint. He started reaching out to other veterans struggling with catastrophic injuries, not as someone who'd figured everything out, but as someone who'd been in the darkest place and found a way through. He didn't offer platitudes or false optimism. He offered something far more valuable: proof that transformation was possible and a roadmap for how to navigate it. Comment below, transformation is possible. He started training his other senses, not as a rehabilitation exercise, but as a genuine exploration of human capability. And what he discovered shocked him. Within months, he could navigate complex environments using echolocation, making clicking sounds with his tongue, and interpreting the returning echoes to build mental maps of spaces. Things that seemed impossible became his new normal. He could identify people by their breathing patterns before they spoke. He could sense emotional states through subtle changes in body temperature and micro-movements that sighted people never notice because they're too busy looking at faces. But the real transformation wasn't physical. It was perceptual, philosophical, spiritual even. Losing his sight didn't blind him to the world. It opened his eyes to dimensions of human experience that most people never access. He started noticing the invisible threads that connect us all, the unspoken communications that happen beneath words, the truth that people reveal through tone and timing and the spaces between sentences. He could hear when someone was lying, not because he had superhuman abilities, but because he wasn't distracted by the performance people put on with their facial expressions and body language. Ivan began to understand that we live in a world obsessed with surfaces, with appearances, with the visible markers of success and happiness and connection. But underneath all that visual noise, there's a deeper reality, a truth that can only be perceived when you stop looking and start truly paying attention. He realized that for most of his life, he'd been seeing with his eyes and missing everything. The real person, the authentic emotion, the genuine connection. All of it was invisible to the kind of seeing he'd relied on before. This revelation didn't come all at once. It emerged gradually through hundreds of small moments, interactions, and insights that accumulated over time. But once Ivan began to see the world this way, once he understood that blindness had given him access to a kind of clarity that eluded most sighted people, everything changed. His purpose shifted from trying to recover what he'd lost to sharing what he'd discovered. And that decision, that fundamental shift in perspective, would end up impacting thousands of lives in ways he never imagined. Now I want to go even deeper into this transformation, because what Ivan did next wasn't just about adapting to disability. It was about recognizing that every limitation contains within it a hidden gift, a doorway to capabilities and insights that wouldn't exist without the constraint. He started reaching out to other veterans struggling with catastrophic injuries. Not as someone who'd figured everything out, but as someone who'd been in the darkest place and found a way through. He didn't offer platitudes or false optimism. He offered something far more valuable: proof that transformation was possible and a roadmap for how to navigate it. Comment below, transformation is possible today. Ivan Castro has personally mentored over 300 veterans dealing with life-altering injuries. He's spoken at rehabilitation centers, military bases, and veteran organizations across the country. But more than the numbers, more than the speeches and the recognition, what matters most to Ivan is the individual transformation he witnesses. The soldier who thought their life was over, who now runs marathons. The veteran who lost limbs and found a new career as a motivational speaker. The young man who came home broken and is now helping other broken people find their way back to wholeness. Ivan doesn't tell them that everything will be okay. He doesn't promise that the pain will disappear or that they'll ever be the same person they were before. Instead, he teaches them how to see in the dark, how to navigate uncertainty, not by eliminating it, but by developing new ways of perceiving and responding to it. He shows them that losing something doesn't mean you've lost everything, and that sometimes what feels like the end is actually just a different kind of beginning. His story isn't just about blindness, though. It's about every limitation we face, every moment we feel broken, every time we think we can't go on. It's about the choice we all have when life takes something from us that we thought we couldn't live without. Do we spend our energy trying to get back to who we were, or do we invest that same energy into discovering who we might become? Do we mourn the loss forever, or do we eventually ask what this experience might be teaching us? What capabilities it might be revealing, what unexpected gifts might be hidden inside this unwanted change? Because here's the truth that I've discovered through years of darkness and struggle. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And when circumstances force us to change who we are, when they strip away the familiar ways we've always navigated reality, we're given a rare opportunity to rebuild our perception from the ground up. Most people never get that chance. They go through life seeing the same things in the same ways, never questioning whether there might be deeper layers of reality they're missing. Ivan once told me something that I've never forgotten. He said, "I used to see with my eyes and miss everything that mattered. I saw faces but not souls. I saw actions but not intentions. I saw the surface of life but never the depth. Now I see with my heart, with my intuition, with every sense except the one I lost, and I've never seen more clearly." Blindness didn't take my vision. It gave me a vision I never had before, a way of perceiving truth that most people spend their whole lives searching for. That's the power of transformation. Not the kind that comes easy, not the kind you choose or plan for, but the kind that gets forced upon you by circumstances beyond your control. The question is never whether change will come. Change always comes. The question is whether you'll resist it until it destroys you, or whether you'll eventually surrender to it and discover what new form you might take on the other side. If you made it this far, if Ivan's story connected with something in you, then you're exactly the kind of person this channel was created for. We tell stories about people who've been broken and rebuilt themselves from the ground up. Stories that don't get told enough in a world obsessed with easy wins and overnight success. Real transformation is messy, painful, slow, and absolutely worth it. So if that resonates with you, hit that subscribe button, because there are so many more stories like this that need to be shared, and I want you here for all of them. Drop a comment and write, "I made it to the end, so I know you were here, so I know this story meant something to you." And if you connected with this, hit the like button. Not for the algorithm, but because it tells me that these stories matter, that taking the time to tell them well is worth it. There's another video right here that continues this conversation about transformation through adversity, about people who refuse to let their circumstances define their limits. Click on it and keep going with me, because once you start seeing the world through these stories, once you understand what's really possible when people stop making excuses and start making choices, you can't go back to seeing things the way you used to. And honestly, why would you want to?